Good day. It's July 12th, 2020. And I wasn't going to make any more videos. But last night I heard an interview by one of these people that are an expert on Lyme disease. This one was Chris Newby. And of course I was aware of it, but I learned a few more things about it. I wasn't going to get into statistics, but it sounds like Lyme disease, in conjunction with a lot of the other diseases that are spread by ticks, and I've had one about four years ago. Up in the Rocky Mountains. I'm not sure. I don't think it was Rocky Mountain spotted fever, but one of the illnesses that you get. Mine came down pretty quick. Within 24 hours, I was real sleepy, and then I got so weak I could hardly stand up. And the next day, I couldn't get up, hardly out of bed, and I just sat in a chair and had symptoms of mild vomiting and absolutely no appetite, some fever. Anyway, later that day I found a tick up on my arm, and I had a friend that we were able to get it because it was kind of hard to get it. And slowly I got better, but who knows, I may still have symptoms, because the worst thing I had was just real weakness and muscle aches and sleepiness, and I had some rashes. But anyway, the point of this video, one of the points, is that tick-borne illnesses have been, the statistics are there that there's 4 more problems associated with ticks than there are from the coronavirus. And yet, look how the world has changed just in a matter of few months. It all shows what the media can do, because the control of the media and publishing houses, mass communication, is the ultimate science that can control people, even more than banking in a way. Although I'm an advocate that all our problems extend from central banking, which I still feel. It's just that it's not as apparent, and it's obviously from reactions to my videos over the last few years that not a whole lot of people understand banking and how it can affect the world in which we live. So maybe you should look at, rather than viruses, ticks. I guess I have to face the possibility that I'm kind of a visionary because of things I've tried to get promoted. My biggest one, of course, is what I've told you in other videos, is that there's a 4th phase of matter, a structured, the structuring phase, the easy, the enhanced, exclusion zone effects that we have in all other of the 4 phases of matter, 1, 2, 3, and the 5th, plasma. The first 3 being air, solids, and liquids, air, liquids, and solids. But all those can be structured, and you have to understand that fourth phase, because there's where you really learn the differentiations of what structuring in all matter is. And I went into that in my other video, but this is at least as important to science as microbiology was, the introduction of how germs, the little things in life, can affect health. And, before, earlier in the days, doctors didn't even wash their hands. They would just work on wounds or even surgery in patients without washing their hands. So a big change was made in healthcare and in medicine, and I like to call it healthcare, by the introduction of washing, because of the understanding of what was going on in the biology on a small scale. But actually, this may be even more important than that. It may be equivalent to the invention of the wheel. Because the unique thing about, or the important thing about structuring is that once it's understood and studied, it can be applied to all fields of science, not just health, but building, structure, materials, and putting them together, and building a UFO, a gravity object, that something can function in our atmosphere at a whole different level than what an aeroplane does. It's like the difference between, most people know how to get into a car and stick a key in and turn it on, and get the engine going and steer it, put it into gear and steer it. And it would be easier to walk up the ramp in a UFO, a functional gravity craft, and get in it and operate the stick, which can either be a full-long stick like in a fighter plane, or a little hand stick that's more popular on your large, all your equipment that works in the dirt, such as backhoes, all those industrial equipment. They have little joysticks, kind of like, to operate them. I'm rambling now, but visionary. Just like banking, today's banking is based on debt creation, whereas if we had a currency or a trade system that was based on assets, which is pluses, positives rather than negatives, would have an entire different world. And that's what some people are wanting to do with a new economic system. But of course, the banksters, and because they own the media, are promoting their own rebooting of actually just another rehashing of the same old thing. There's very little material gets out onto the internet regarding a positive new currency trade system being employed rather than the negative debt creation. A positive would be based on a combination of precious metals, popular products such as oil, and ourselves, the asset of ourself, because as I've said earlier, when you go to a bank for a mortgage or a loan, it's actually a promissory note and it's based on your signature, and the bank uses that as a plus, and they trick you into paying interest on that when it's actually your name on that paper that you've signed, which is the value. That's the asset. So then they use that as a plus on their ledger, and then they'll loan other people more mortgages so on that, and so it's ballooning just from that, plus they're making interest on it. So a true people's bank would be based solely on that signature, and because we're all different, even though we're created the same under the law, supposedly, we have different abilities. Some are good singers, some are good ball players, some have all different kinds of smarts up here. Some people just can memorize stuff, and of course in a school system today, the people who can regurgitate stuff that they've memorized get the higher grades, where those people who just think, they don't do so well. Take me, for example, a visionary. So I wish in 20 minutes I could explain more about a positive birthright life rather than a negative birthright life. It's been done more recently and then continually back in throughout history, that if you don't have a lot of regulators and people telling you what you can't do, the people who can do exceed and get to the top, and the society tends to follow and run after them. But more and more so in the last 1,000 years, and more so even in the last 50 years, we are being told by foundations such as the Rockefeller Foundation, Bill Gates Foundation, the Clinton Foundation, George Soros's different foundations. These type of people are telling us, guiding us, tricking us, scamming us into following what they want, which is a centralized, dictatorial control system on a global scale. So this positive versus negative birthright is also what I referred to in my book, The Tablets of Destinies. The destinies, and some people call it the Tablet of Destiny, but it's actually, if you research it way back, it's the tablet, not tablets, the Tablet of Destinies, because there's two paths, two destinies that you can go. And this tablet, whether it's a real thing or not, doesn't really matter. It's an idea that you can go one path or you can go the other path, the positive and the negative. And historically, this has been passed on from the negative side to the positive side every 2,000 years or whenever the people demand it. But it's, even if the people don't demand it, it's supposed to be a cyclic thing where one side relinquishes that and gives it to the other side. And it was supposed to have been done back in the 1960s or even the 50s, 40s. The time really doesn't matter. Even today, the powers that be, these foundations that are all pushing the globalist system, the corporate system, are refusing to relinquish it over to the positive side. So that's what the trade wars, the currency wars are really all about. It's not about viruses. It's not about the Rockefeller and the Gates plans about killing off 60, 70, 80, 90% of the population because they feel they would do so much better without 90% of us. And since they've got the money and the wealth, their power seems to be carried out. And you people out there are all too weak to do anything about it. And I'm not talking about going to war against them. I'm talking about just reestablishing the positive system. Like I said in my other videos, it's a competition. All you have to do is get it going, and more people are going to see the evils of the negative system. They're going to give up the corporate life, and they're going to go back to the natural laws. And one of the biggest ones is in health. Instead of consuming MSG adulterated foods and GMO foods and water that's got chlorine and fluoride in it, all this stuff lowers your vibrations. It unstructures your fourth phase. It lowers you into a water state that doesn't have any structuring in it. A simple second phase of water, of blood, of the fluids in your body, when it's unstructured, it's pretty much uniform throughout. It's stagnating. It's dead. That's why I say you have to look at the fourth phase, because it's the more structured, the more electronically working that matter is, the higher it gets. And this is even true with the plasma stage of matter. All that is the greatest thing to be told to you since the invention of the wheel. It's something that would take at least a year to begin the education, but those of you who understand the natural ways of health already know what I'm talking about. So all you people that are already into natural laws are well on the way to understanding and grasping and learning and going more into what I'm talking about. This could be a true new world. But the Gateses and the Soroses and the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds have all kept you imprisoned in the world that you have today, and they want to even implement it further and make you more robotic, hook you up to complete computers, rather than plugging yourselves back into the higher natural laws, the universal laws, which we could be into, or we could start getting more into throughout the rest of this year, or next year, or the year after, if we began to practice that, rather than just doggedly signing on the paper contracts, the two-dimensional contracts that these globalists want to imprison you in. I'm going to include in this a link to this Dr. James Giordano of Georgetown University, because you have to watch that. These are the type of people that brought you Lyme disease. This Chris was talking about how back in the Kennedy days, JFK, they were spreading ticks in Cuba in order to kill off the sugarcane fields. These are the type of people, I mean, they should all be in straitjackets in a cuckoo ward instead of out running things in this world. Imagine the mentality, the mindset of these people developing bacteria, viruses to be inserted in ticks as a war agent and spreading them on a population. And she said, well, one of the people that more recently came out and told about this, he was one of the people that was spreading this stuff over Cuba. And he came back to Texas where he lived, and his child, his baby, came down with a virus or bacteria or whatever. He had carried it back with him. And of course, this is what's the whole thing behind Lyme disease. It was created in a combination of a warfare lab in Fort Detrick, Maryland, and the one out on Long Island that jumped over into Lyme, Connecticut, and spread throughout. And then there was the one in Montana. These people are all getting paid good money to come up with these diseases to attack other people. And of course, they think they can totally control it and that they'll never get it and that it'll never spread. Well, I learned that when I was a beekeeper about the so-called killer bees. You know, the bees were brought over from Africa back in the 1950s, I think it was, early 50s, to Brazil, because some guy had a bright idea that they could make more honey, which was, they didn't, and even back in Africa. But anyway, the whole thing got out of control when some of these bees escaped, you know, and bees, you know, they fly. And so now we have, at least in the warmer climates here in North America, we have bees from Africa that can compete the local bees. And of course I went through all that, and that's another story, but I learned the hard way about how some idiots that think of themselves as gods can play with our DNA and think that they know what they're doing and can keep it under control. And whether you want to look at it, as I've said, we could become the grays, the gray aliens that people talk about and claim that they see, and some people. That's just one timeline that we could go to. We could become half robots like the grays, biological entities that can't reproduce anymore. We have to go to the lab to procreate instead of doing it the natural way. Because the more we become corporatized, the more our vibration is lowered, the less likely we can reproduce. Which we shouldn't be out there procreating like the Catholics and the Mormons anyway, because we have reached a very populated state. But that doesn't mean we have to go around killing each other like Bill Gates wants us to do, or the Clintons, or the other globalists. We could stop, just have 1 or 2 children. But we have to get a handle on this. We have to stop following these crazy gut doctors that are basically the evil doctor, the Dr. No, from the James Bond movies and the other movies that try to tell us a little bit of truth. We should follow Tesla instead of Einstein. Einstein has been used by the globalists because he was big on formulas and equations to write on the blackboard and to print up. Whereas Tesla, he had it in his mind like a blueprint. He could vision it. He was a visionary. And I have that same ability, not as well as his, but I can picture the blueprints far enough where if I start building it, over time I will figure out the rest of the blueprint, where Tesla had the ability to see the entire thing. And we have AC current to thank for him, whereas if he had been totally suppressed, we'd all be following Edison today, still using DC volt currents, which really doesn't even work across a large city. It loses too much of its power, where AC current can be distributed by power lines across the country, the entire country. Of course, Tesla already was working on putting this through his Tesla towers, like he was building on Long Island and like he had to a smaller extent in Colorado Springs prior. And that could be redone today. There's one tower in Texas, Central Texas already, which few people are studying, as a simplification of what Nikola Tesla built on Long Island. But anyway, I'm rambling. These are all things that could be if we were under a positive birthright system today rather than the negative. Let's see, that's just about 30 minutes. That's not too bad. I've pretty much covered it. I'm going to leave a link to one of these Rockefeller Foundation plans that whether the thing is true or not doesn't matter. The fact that you can read it, and it was written at least a few years ago. Supposedly it was written in 2010, but it could be fake. Just like the Protocols of Zion, the Elders of Zion. Is an argument out there whether they're fake or whether they're true. But just reading them, you go, wow, the fact that somebody could put this down in paper, just like with the Rockefeller plan here, and it's what's happening, is what should be important, whether or not who wrote it or when it was even written. The fact that you can read it today, and it's talking about today and tomorrow, what's going to happen next year. There's these crazy people out there trying to shut down the farm labor because there's coronavirus. And what happens if our crops aren't harvested and put into the food chain so we can eat them? We'll have an apocalypse like what happened in the Ukraine back under the Soviet Union, under the communists, under Stalin. He killed millions of people in the Ukraine. These dictators that come about ever so often, just like the ones now, which is actually a corporation that's dictating you right now, which is even worse than a Stalin. At least a Stalin or a Hitler or a Mao Zedong, Mao, could be shot. But how are you going to shoot a computer? Well, you can unplug it, but maybe it's got an atomic power source to it. You get my point. The cloud is there. We are being controlled by the cloud. Yeah, so much for Einstein versus Tesla, with Edison being on Einstein's side. He was overrated. They were both overrated. You got to get out of that gear of Edison being so great. You got to look at the Nikola Teslas. That's enough. That's 33 minutes. That should be enough.